I've got the manifesto here. Where in this manifesto does it say that the next Labour government is going to increase spending by 74 billion and raise taxes by 40 billion? Because I have looked through it and I can't find it.
Well, you'll know that when I became Chancellor in July, that officials at the Treasury presented me with information that the previous government were overspending to the tune of £22 billion more than they had planned. In addition to that, there were compensation schemes that the previous government had signed up to but had not budgeted for. Infected blood and the Post Office Horizon scandal. And thirdly, I'll just finish this point, and thirdly, the previous government hadn't done a spending review that took us beyond this year, and inflation had put huge...
By now, everyone is aware of the £22 billion black hole, the Labour Party's preferred refuge for concealing their debts. How could anyone forget the day Rachel Reeves stepped onto the stage with a startling budget? And if that announcement wasn't enough, it was her smugness while detailing her plans for potential future crises that truly infuriated people. Describing this as an atrocity might sound like an overstatement, but let's be real. When your own Chancellor appears poised to jeopardize the financial stability of the country, it certainly doesn't inspire confidence, does it?
If you accept Chancellor, even if you accept the 22 billion black hole, 8 billion of that is because you decided to settle public sector pay disputes. Are you telling me, seriously, that you did not have an inkling before the general election that you might have to find billions of pounds to settle those pay disputes? And why didn't you level with the British public about that?
The previous government set the remit for the pay review bodies, the independent pay review bodies, and astonishingly, and we did not know this, and you did not know this either, they hadn't set an affordability criteria for the pay review bodies. Two of the pay review bodies, on defence and education, had already reported before the general election was called.
Two oversight bodies in the defence and education sectors had already reported before the general elections were called, and the previous government capitalised on this information. It was a burden inherited from the prior administration. Now, let's discuss the fact that Rachel Reeves, who constantly bemoans the financial chaos the Tories have thrown her into, carelessly handed over more than £4.3 billion to illegal immigrants, treating it like pocket change. Today, ministers are announcing the allocation of millions in additional funds to lawyers who, as I understand, will advocate for asylum seekers to help address the backlog of appeals that are blocking the eviction of migrants from hotels. Naturally, we all want these individuals to gain approval and start covering their own accommodation costs, presumably funded by their substantial salaries as engineers, astronauts, and neurosurgeons. After all, we all know they fit that mold. And while we're at it, who could forget how the Labour Party allocated an astonishing £22.3 billion to junior doctors and nurses in the National Health Service, who were already earning respectable salaries simply because they wanted a little extra in their pockets?
Taxes, it's the biggest tax-raising budget since 1993. It's gigantic. And you said before the election no plans to raise taxes, or the PM did, beyond the 8 billion that you had earmarked. So a lot of people out there are going to be quite shocked today.
Well, in the decisions that we've made in the budget today, I accept that this is a big and a substantial budget. It wasn't the budget that I was. It wasn't the budget.
Straight with them.
It wasn't the budget that I was expecting to deliver when I became Chancellor on the 5th of July. I didn't think that any government would be so reckless to have £22 billion of unfunded
You've lifted taxes by
commitments.
£40 billion.
I absolutely recognise that. In our manifesto, we had commitments of £8.5 billion. In addition, as I said.
And what did people receive in return? Absolutely nothing good. The Labour Party wasted its funds on exorbitantly high taxes and even provided winter fuel allowances to pensioners, the only thing that kept them warm during the frigid winter months. Yet somehow Reeves still has the audacity to parade around defending these callous decisions as if she had accomplished something significant for the nation, facing the £22 billion black hole left by the Conservatives this year. Along with a triple lock that ensures the state pension will only increase by £1,700 during this parliamentary term, I can't help but view it as a disgrace. This farce ultimately led the Labour Party to where they rightfully belong, in complete humiliation. £40 billion in taxes, the previous government granted powers to payment control authorities, and surprisingly, we were unaware, just as you were, that they had failed to establish accessibility criteria for these authorities.
Are you honestly saying that you have a democratic mandate for the measures that you have announced today? Tens of billions of pounds in increased spending and tens of billions of pounds of tax rises, none of which is in this document. You have a democratic mandate for this.
The first line of the first step in our manifesto was to return stability to our economy. That is the most important thing that I had to do as Chancellor. And we do have a mandate for bringing that stability back to the economy.
I think there'll be a lot of people thinking that they voted for you and you have just done the biggest tax and spend budget that we have seen for decades, and that is not what they signed up for.
There were two choices that I had to make today as Chancellor of the Exchequer. The first was whether I was going to be open and honest.
Do you accept that, though? Can you see that the public might feel cheated?
During the general election campaign, we declared an immediate allocation of funds, which ended up costing you several £billion. Now that figure has ballooned to 22.6 billion. Let's not sugarcoat things. Starmer's leadership in Downing Street has resulted in financial disaster, and the Labour Party's jokes about police strategy are only digging them deeper into a political grave. When this government either falls apart or is ousted, Reeves and her colleagues could find themselves unemployed and without any excuses.
Reeves told me repeatedly before the general election, when I kept saying to him, the NHS is going to need more funding, he repeatedly kept saying, funding is not the answer, we're going to get it through growth. You have just announced 22.6 billion in extra day-to-day spending for the NHS. You just were not straight with the British people, and they will see through this. You were not straight.
We announced in the general election campaign that there would be an immediate injection of cash.
It was a few £billion which you had costed.
Into
this is
22.6
billion.
When Wes became Health Secretary on the 5th of July, he asked Lord Darcy, independent peer, to do a review about the state of our National Health Service. And the report was damning and it was shocking. But Wes was also told that unless more money was available, the number of appointments...
Chancellor,
Today, the government announced that it has proposed an average salary increase of 22.3% for junior doctors. This means that the junior doctors who have been advocating for their rights and striking for the past 20 months were actually seeking a salary increase of around 25%. So what was all this financial tension really about? Was it merely a display when those in need demanded respect for their rights? Let's be honest, there is no justification for this. The Labour Party is accountable for the wrongs they have inflicted upon the British people.
This budget, in terms of tax and spend, is £74 billion in spending by the end of this Parliament, £41 billion in tax rises. I have done a number of budgets, and this scorecard, in terms, I have never seen anything like it, and I've done this for 15 years. It's the biggest budget I have ever covered. It is incredibly definitive in terms of a kind of very Labour budget of big tax and big spend. But I think the issue here is, while Rachel Reeves talked there about choices, Rishi Sunak gave the counter-argument, which I think will now be chewed over ferociously, actually, which is this was not laid out in the manifesto. This is not what the Labour government implied. When I asked the Prime Minister at our leader...
Yet here we are, forced to listen to the esteemed Chancellor, who has a habit of kicking the British when they're already on edge, now attempting to justify her actions in front of everyone by blaming the ghosts of the previous government. The Conservatives failed to secure victory, but isn't that the point? That's why the public rejected them and gave the Labour Party a chance to redeem. If people were genuinely excited about the Tory circus, do you really think Starmer would be lingering around Downing Street enjoying all the perks? Absolutely not. The voters would be dissatisfied. That's not what they signed up for, is it? No, and he came into power with a very low percentage of vote. He ended up in his position by default because people were unhappy with the Conservatives. They voted for the Labour Party, but they didn't particularly favour him. And now things are even worse. What are your thoughts on this video? Share your opinions in the comments. See you soon.